The tension between Prince Harry and the rest of the royal family has once again erupted into open conflict, this time over the most personal issue of all, his children. Reports emerging from royal insiders reveal that King Charles has flatly refused to allow Archie and Lilibet to be hosted or formally recognized at Buckingham Palace. For Harry, this rejection was nothing short of a declaration of war. He allegedly exploded in fury, demanding that his father respect his children's royal birthright. But Charles, ever cautious of the monarchy's public image, stood firm, drawing a red line that has left Harry seething and increasingly isolated. What makes this latest scandal so explosive is not simply the refusal itself, but what it represents. Harry has spent years presenting himself as both a defender of his wife and children and as a rebel against the institution that raised him. Yet in pushing for Archie and Lilibet to gain a formal presence inside Buckingham Palace, he is not only seeking recognition, but also legitimacy for his family's future role. To Charles and William, however, it smacked of opportunism. After years of incendiary interviews, damning memoirs, and public attacks on the crown, the Sussex request was seen less as a reconciliation and more as a tactical maneuver to claw back influence. The palace refusal underscores a painful reality for Harry. He is no longer in control of the narrative. His demands, once amplified by sympathetic media and global fascination, now fall on deaf ears. And worse, every angry outburst plays directly into the image of him as petulant, entitled, and reckless, a man unable to balance personal pride with the dignity expected of a prince. Charles's decision not to extend the palace invitation to Archie and Lilibet was not just a slight, but a calculated message that the monarchy's continuity will not be dictated by Harry's whims or temper. The fallout from Charles's refusal was immediate and dramatic. Sources close to Buckingham Palace described Harry as apoplectic, reportedly shouting during phone conversations and vowing that his father had crossed an unforgivable line. He allegedly warned that the refusal was an insult not only to him but to his children, who, as grandchildren of the reigning monarch, should have their place within the family's ancestral seat. But Charles and William, aligned in a rare show of unity, rejected this framing. To them, it was about trust, and Harry had squandered it long ago. For Charles, the stakes go beyond family tensions. The monarchy has been fighting a battle for survival in the modern age, with public support fragile and scandals threatening to erode centuries of tradition. Allowing Archie and Lilibet to be paraded at Buckingham Palace would, in his eyes, undermine the very institution he swore to protect. It would signal that Harry and Meghan could burn bridges publicly, only to return at their convenience and demand royal privileges. Charles's refusal, therefore, was not just personal but deeply political, rooted in a desire to protect the crown from what he perceives as the Sussex's ongoing brand-building strategy. Harry's reaction, however, has only deepened perception that he is losing control. Insiders claim that following the refusal, he began threatening legal action, raising the possibility of challenging his children's status through courts if necessary. While the practicality of such a move is questionable, the symbolism is devastating. A son dragging his father, the King of England, into a legal battle over access to Buckingham Palace would represent the ultimate fracture, a royal scandal unlike anything in modern history. Meanwhile, Meghan's role in this crisis has fueled even more speculation. Some insiders suggest she encouraged Harry to press the issue, seeing Buckingham Palace recognition as a way to cement her children's legacy within the monarchy. Others claim she warned him that his anger would only worsen the situation, but Harry's pride left him deaf to reason. Whatever her position, one fact remains. The Sussexes are once again at the center of a controversy that has overshadowed their attempts to build a life of independence in California. Media reaction has been swift and merciless. British tabloids have painted Harry's outburst as childish and entitled, with headlines mocking his tantrum diplomacy. In the United States, once a bastion of support for the couple, commentators are increasingly critical. Talk shows and op-eds question why Harry, who fled the monarchy claiming to seek freedom, now fights tooth and nail for palace recognition. To critics, it reeks of hypocrisy. How could a man who claimed Buckingham Palace was a prison for his wife now demand access for his children? The contradictions are becoming too glaring to ignore, and Harry's fury has only amplified them. The more Harry pushes, the more he risks losing the very sympathy that once shielded him. Veterans of the Invictus Games have privately grumbled that the constant Sussex drama has begun to overshadow the game's purpose. Hollywood executives, once eager to align with Meghan and Harry's star power, are reportedly reconsidering future partnerships. Netflix, which has already invested heavily in the couple, faces pressure to ensure future projects deliver substance rather than scandal. All of this creates a backdrop where Harry's public meltdowns over Buckingham Palace access seem increasingly self-destructive, yet Harry appears blind to the shifting tide. Friends say he views his fight as not just about his children, but about justice itself. In his mind, Charles's refusal represents a betrayal of his family, a refusal to recognize the legitimacy of the bloodline he fought so hard to protect. But what Harry fails to see is how his explosive behavior has become the very obstacle preventing reconciliation. Charles and William are not merely stonewalling him out of spite. They are responding to a pattern of behavior that they believe threatens the crown's survival. As the dust of the initial rejection began to settle, Buckingham Palace carefully controlled its silence. The refusal to host Archie and Lilibet was deliberate, and so too was the absence of any conciliatory statement. Behind palace walls, senior courtiers were said to be relieved that Charles held firm. In their view, any softening would have emboldened Harry to push even further, creating a precedent that could weaken the monarchy's authority. But to Harry, silence felt like salt on an open wound. He interpreted the lack of outreach as a calculated slight against his children and against himself, fueling his sense of betrayal. What followed was a series of behind-the-scenes confrontations. Palace insiders claim Harry made multiple attempts to directly call his father, but those calls are often diverted or scheduled through aides. Charles, according to reports, grew weary of Harry's volatility. William, too, played a decisive role, advising his father not to cave. The Prince of Wales, who has long taken a harder stance against his younger brother, reportedly argued that Harry's demands were less about family unity and more about using the monarchy for personal leverage. William's influence carried weight, and with it, Harry's hopes of reconciliation shrank. Harry's behavior during this period, described by sources close to him, veered from desperation to rage. On one hand, he spoke passionately about the importance of his children knowing their heritage and having access to the palace that symbolized their ancestry. On the other, he lashed out at what he saw as hypocrisy within the royal family, arguing that disgraced figures in the monarchy were offered more respect than his innocent children. His outbursts, however, did little to help his cause. Instead, they were leaked, spun, and published in ways that painted him as unstable and increasingly detached from reality. The refusal began to have ripple effects beyond family. In California, where Harry and Meghan had built a life, whispers grew louder among Hollywood's elite. Producers and executives wondered aloud why Harry continued to fight for the very institution he once condemned. Meghan's carefully curated public image as a strong, independent figure was complicated by Harry's constant obsession with the crown. Some in Hollywood began to see them not as inspirational exiles, but as figures trapped in the very drama they claimed to have escaped. Meanwhile, public opinion in the UK hardened further. Polls showed a steep decline in sympathy for Harry, with many Britons supporting Charles's stance. To them, Archie and Lilibet were innocent children, but Harry's insistence on palace recognition was seen as self-serving, an attempt to force the monarchy to legitimize his Californian lifestyle choices. Tabloid front pages ran with headlines that mocked Harry's palace tantrum, while broadsheets analyzed the constitutional implications of a monarch refusing to host his grandchildren. The episode had become more than family drama. It was now a full-scale national debate. As weeks turned into months, the confrontation reached a decisive turning point. Harry, realizing that his furious calls and legal threats were not moving the needle, doubled down in public. In interviews and subtle media leaks, he portrayed himself as a father fighting for his children's rightful place in history. But the more he pushed his narrative, the more the cracks showed. Critics pointed out that Harry had willingly abandoned his palace life, rejected royal duties, and launched attacks on his family in memoirs and documentaries. The contradiction between his past actions and present demands was too glaring to ignore. King Charles, for his part, stood unyielding. In a rare moment of quiet firmness, he reportedly told close aides that Buckingham Palace would remain a symbol of stability and continuity not a stage for Harry's outbursts. Charles's refusal to bend became a defining act of his reign, signaling that his role as monarch required discipline even in the face of personal pain. Behind the scenes, William was said to be quietly satisfied. His brother's fury in his eyes only justified the decision to draw a firm line. The final blow came when courtiers hinted to the press that Buckingham Palace might never serve as a home base for Archie and Lilibet, regardless of future circumstances. For Harry, this was the ultimate humiliation. Not only had his father rejected his request, but the palace machinery had effectively shut the door on his children's future within the monarchy. In his mind, the message was unmistakable. His bloodline had been sidelined, his family exiled in spirit as well as geography. The fallout was devastating for Harry's public image. Where once he had been seen as a rebellious but sympathetic figure, he was now framed as a man consumed by rage, unable to let go of the very system he had rejected. The irony was brutal. In trying to force his children into Buckingham Palace, he had only cemented their exclusion. For Charles, the refusal had fortified his position as king, protecting the monarchy from further destabilization. For William, it was a victory in his ongoing battle to preserve the crown from his brother's chaos.